A bitter wind drags across the moors like a whip, lifting the tattered fringe of a woolen cloak wrapped tight around the ribs of a boy no older than 13. His feet, bare and bleeding, press into frozen soil that once fed his ancestors, now cracked and barren. The sky above is iron, low and unmoved, watching as if it had seen it all before, and it had. Behind him, a procession walks in silence, gaunt mothers with hollow cheeks clutching bundles of kindling and swaddled infants. Men dragging sledges with wooden icons lashed to the front, crude and hastily carved from blackened timber. They do not speak. Their breath escapes in white puffs, but no words form. These are not pilgrims. They are the unwanted, exiled by famine, by sickness, by the cruel suspicion of those who remained behind stone walls and feasted behind closed gates. They carry no names anymore, only burdens. Their destination lies ahead, a ruined shrine, buried deep within the blackwood forest, a place older than the churches, older than the borders of kingdoms. A place once set to drink away despair, or, more cruelly, to keep it asleep beneath the roots. They had walked 2 days without fire. The older children now rode silently atop sledges, limbs thin as willow twigs, eyes empty. The elders led in, silence, carrying the old rites in their hands, strips of linen soaked in herbs, crusts of hard bread for the basin, a wax seal meant to bind the ritual. Hope was a language these people no longer spoke. In this age, belief had teeth. If you could not pay in coin, you paid in breath, in memory, in bone. As they reached the broken clearing, the boy stopped. A crumbling basin of stone rose from the ground like a buried mouth, its edges flaked with green moss and centuries of rot. Vines coiled around its base like veins. One of the elders whispered, and the others took their places, forming a ring around the shrine. This was the rite. This was how they remembered to survive. The boy stepped forward, thin fingers trembling. His face was smeared with soot, and he looked not at the sky, but at the water inside the basin, dark, still, bitter with old ash. An elder broke a crust of bread and dropped it in. It floated, then sank. Candles were lit, not for warmth, but for witness. The scent of wet earth and burnt rosemary clung to the air. The ritual was simple. Drink, kneel, confess. But what one confessed was never spoken aloud to others. It was for the basin, for the soil, for whatever still listened. Beneath the roots, some whispered guilt, some gave thanks, some begged. But the boy, he hesitated. He had not eaten in 3 days. He had stolen from a dying man's satchel. He had wished, more than once, for his sister to fade first so he could take her portion of bread. These thoughts haunted him, but he could not say them. His lips parted, but the words caught in the dry hollows of his throat. And then a sound, a bell, one soft ring. It's distant, cold, not from the procession, not from any church. It came from behind, from the path they had walked, empty and wind-blown. That was not part of the ritual. No one turned, not at first. The boy froze, water still dripping from his lips. Mothers clutched their children tighter. A woman began to sob, not loudly, but in a way that sounded like the breaking of ice. The elders did not speak. One of them made the sign of the cross. Another whispered a name no one recognized. Then a second bell, fainter, further, and footsteps. Not many, just one set. Slow, steady. The crunch of leaf rot and frost under boots, not made by any in the group. Leather straps, iron, buckles, heavy, deliberate steps. No one moved. The forest had fallen still. The trees listened. The sky waited. The boy's heart pounded, reached again for the basin, as if it might protect him. The elder beside him dropped another piece of bread into the water. Another candle lit. Too late. The sound of footsteps grew closer from the woods behind them. A figure emerged, cloaked in something the color of wet bark, hooded, face hidden. It carried a bell in one hand, tarnished, cracked, its tongue rusted, but not silent. The other hand hung limp at its side, blackened and still. It did not speak, it only stood. The wind moved around it, but never touched its robes. An old man at the rear of the group whispered, "It comes for what was left unsaid." The figure remained motionless, waiting, listening, as if it could smell the confession that had not passed the boy's lips. The hunger not spoken, the guilt unwept. The elders began to chant again, faster now. Their voices shook. Their hands clutched relics, scraps of old cloth, small bones, half-faded medallions. The candles flickered in protest. The basin's water rippled, though no wind had touched it. And then another figure stepped forward. A girl, small, barefoot, her hair matted with mud and frost. She could not have been more than 7. Her eyes were wrong, one blind and clouded, the other sharp as flint. She had no family in the group, no name anyone remembered. But she moved with purpose, as if she had always known this moment would. "Come, Dot." She approached the boy. He did not flinch. She knelt beside him. The figure in the woods did not move. The girl placed her hand in the basin. Steam rose where her fingers touched. The vines curled tighter around the stone. She whispered something, not in Latin, not in any tongue of man. The water went still. The bell did not ring again. The figure lowered its head. Slowly, it turned, robes dragging softly across the ground, and vanished into the trees. No one followed. No one breathed. The girl stood, walked away, and vanished among the crowd like a shadow swallowed by dusk. The ritual was complete, but something old had been stirred, and far deeper in the forest, another bell waited, waiting to be answered. A day passed, perhaps 2. Time frayed in the forest, unraveling like old cloth in the wind. The procession moved again, slow as breath on cold glass, their footsteps softened by pine needles and half-frozen mud. No one spoke of the bell. No one looked for the girl. She had become part of the forest now, and the forest did not return what it claimed. They headed deeper into the old glade, toward the remnants of a forgotten village, burned long ago in a plague year. The trees here grew too tall, too close, as if trying to erase the memory of roofs and chimneys and smoke. But under the moss and char, the bones of stone hearths remained, fireplaces without walls, covered doorsteps leading to nothing. It was here they stopped, at the elders called. It asked it. The name was not written in any charter, but passed down by those who remembered which places were cursed and which merely forgotten. And in a world where forgetting was safer than knowing Ashstead had been buried, not by time, but by intention, the boy walked beside a woman with silver hair matted beneath her hood. She had spoken only once since the shrine. "Stay near the fire, if there is fire." Her hands were wrapped in old linen, fingers bent from frostbite. Round her neck, a pouch of dried herbs in a strip of cloth sewn with teeth. Not human, not animal, something in between. The villagers, if one could call them that now, began to clear the blackened remains. They gathered branches, stripped bark, dug through ash, 4 stones, not yet cracked by flame. They would not stay long, only enough to rest and repeat the ritual again and again, till someone found mercy, or until none of them remained to try. Night fell early in Ashstead. The sun vanished behind the trees without warning, and the light that followed was not moonlight, but the color of smoldered wood, gray and faintly red. Fires were built low, barely enough to warm fingers. Heat was rationed like food. It was not for comfort, it was for protection. They lit the fire, the old way, with iron and breath. No oil, no flint, just the striking of stone against patience. Sparks rose slowly, reluctantly, like spirits called from sleep. Once lit, the fire crackled softly in the pit of what had once been a family's home. A broken pot still sat in the ash. Inside, curled and blackened, was a child's spoon. The boy could not stop staring at it beside him. A woman knelt to begin the second rite. This was the ash ritual. When famine turned the heart wild and disease hollowed the lungs, the people turned to flame. It was said that when bread was gone and salt could no longer ward the dead, you burned the names. Names of the forgotten, names of the guilty, names of those you could no longer bear to carry in memory. She unfolded a strip of parchment. On it, written in charcoal, were 6 names. They were not hers. They may not have ever lived. Atita didn't matter. In sacrifice, the truth was in the offering, not the accuracy. She placed the parchment in the fire. It did not burn. A wind passed through the clearing, sharp, sudden. The fire flickered, but the parchment remained whole. The boy stepped back. He knew the story now. He had heard it on the road from an old man with no fingers. If the fire rejects the names, they are not enough. A second parchment was added. 7 more names. The fire hissed, smoked, but the names remained. The elders gathered, whispered. One of them reached into a sack and drew out a rope, short, frayed, stained, dark, once used for binding, or worse. It had belonged to someone who had taken from the dead. A thief who had robbed graves during the fever years. His name had been removed from prayer. This time, the fire took it. It rose high and sharp. Scream, not from any mouth, echoed in the trees, as if the woods themselves coughed out what had been swallowed. Sparks spiraled upward, briefly, lighting the ruins. In that flicker of flame, something moved. Just outside the ring of stone hearths, a shape darted past, low to the ground, fast. But seeing, the boy turned. His heart beat louder than the fire. A low sound followed, not a growl, not words, a kind of humming, deep and cracked. It's like a lullaby sung through teeth. The procession drew close together. The fire was fed more wood. Faces pale, hands clutching charms carved from bone. Fingers traced the air in signs older than crosses. Then, slowly, a woman stood. She had not spoken in days. Her child had died a week earlier, swaddled, buried in frost. She did not wail, nor tremble. She simply walked to the edge of the firelight. Her shadow fell long across the ash. She looked into the darkness, into the trees, and she said one name, not her own, not her child's, a name no one had ever heard. Her speak, the humming stopped. The fire rose higher, and something retreated. No one asked what name it was. No one needed to. Sometimes the only offering left is memory, and memory, when given freely, has weight. The fire burned through the night. No one slept at dawn. The boy woke to find the child's spoon in the ash had been moved, not taken, just turned, as if by a small hand. He did not speak of it. He only tucked it into his cloak. They would leave Ashted by midday. Trees would, close behind them. But in the ash of that ruined village, something ancient had been stirred. Not in anger, but recognition. And ahead, the forest only grew darker. There are places where even the forest forgets its own name. The procession moved now like a memory, unraveling, slower, quieter, leaving no footprints behind them. The trees pressed in closer. Their branches hung low and tangled, heavy with lichen like the beards of dead kings. Sunlight had not touched this ground in a generation. Even the birds refused to sing here. The boy walked at the edge of the group, his eyes fixed on the pathless earth ahead, a tangle of roots and soft rot. where the ground gave way underfoot like old parchment. The child's spoon, now wrapped in linen and tucked close to his chest, pulsed with warmth that shouldn't have been possible. He hadn't told anyone. He wouldn't. In a world where death spoke through wind and omen, some secrets were safer, left cradled in silence. They had entered what the elders called the Hollowing Wood. No maps marked it. No lord claimed it. It was the in-between, not cursed, not blessed, but forgotten in a way that felt deliberate. The kind of forgetting that came with fear. Roots twisted like veins across their path, rising and falling like breath beneath soil. It was said the ground here moved, not from quake or storm, but from what slept below. The shrine they sought lay ahead, not built by hands, but revealed by time, a natural vault, opened by landslide or divine whim, shaped like the ribs of a buried god. The entrance was a crevice, narrow and dark, exhaling a cold so deep it made teeth ache. 2 elders went first, bearing torches made of pine sap and willow bark. The flames hissed against the damp air, casting gold across the stone. Inside, the walls wept. Drops of water clung to the ceiling like suspended tears, falling only when no one watched. Carvings, so old they had outlived language, spiraled across the rock, symbols of birds and ropes and severed hands. There were no saints. Here, no crosses. This was older than forgiveness. The boy stepped in last. It was not a cave, not entirely. More like the hollow of a massive root system, petrified by centuries, forming cathedral-like ribs around them. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil, burned resin, and something sour, the smell of long-kept secrets. Moss pulsed faintly in the torchlight, as if breathing. In the center of the chamber lay an altar of stone, not carved, but grown from the root itself. Upon it, a circle of objects, feathers blackened by flame, coins worn faceless, strands of hair braided into ash. Offerings, yes, but also warnings. This was the ritual no one named. Kayla, the one passed only through gesture and silence. Okay. The route. Confession. Each traveler was to place something upon the altar, not a token, a truth. One by one, they stepped forward. An old man placed a rosary made from bone, not his own. A girl, no older than 8, laid down a doll made from corn husk and soot, its head twisted backward. A mother wept as she placed a single shoe, too small now to ever be worn again. When it was the boy's turn, he hesitated. The spoon weighed like stone beneath his cloak. But something deeper moved in him. Not fear, not duty, but an ache. The ache to be seen, truly seen. He stepped forward, unwrapped the linen, and placed the spoon at the center of the altar. At once, the roots groaned low, long, like wood yawning in deep winter. The torchlight flickered violently. Somewhere behind them, the walls of the cavern seemed to shift. The ground beneath their feet trembled, not from collapse, but from stirring. The elders began to chant. Their voices echoed in strange ways, bending, folding, repeating words they hadn't spoken. A rhythm emerged, pulsing like heartbeat. The boy's eyes blurred. He could no longer tell if the walls were wet with water or tears, and then, from the roots, something emerged. Not a creature, not even a shape, a presence, the torchlight. Dimmed, not from wind, but from absorption. The shadows grew thick and oily, and in the silence between breaths, a voice came, not in sound, but in memory. A voice that didn't speak in words, but in regret. The boy felt it first. The image of his sister's hands clutching her stomach as hunger bent her in two. The moment he turned away, the thought, the shameful, burning thought, let her go, so I can live. The root took that memory, held it, reflected it, it showed others, too. The girl who had buried her twin and never cried. The man who had hoarded salt while the village starved. The mother who had abandoned her second child in the reeds, not because she hated him, but because she loved the others too much. It was not punishment. It was exposure. The hollowing wood did not seek to destroy. It remembered. Each person, upon placing their truth, was held in that remembering, and then slowly released. When the last object had been offered, the altar pulsed with faint light, as if exhaling, and all fell silent again. No one retrieved what they had placed. Okay. That was part of the rite. The boy stood last, his knees weak, his chest hollow, but lighter. As they turned to leave, the force seemed to breathe with them. The roots did not move again. The walls no longer wept. Only the memory remained, carved into the space between ribs of stone and root. They emerged from the hollow not into light, but into a fog heavier than before. The wind had changed direction. Distant thunder rolled across the sky, though no storm yet broke. The elders looked to one another, uneasy. Something had been accepted. Something had been awakened. And far ahead, where the sky touched the trees, smoke rose. A village still burned, and their path would lead them straight through it. The smoke tasted of ruin long before they reached its source. It clung to the back of the throat like regret, bitter, acrid, full of endings. The procession moved in silence, their limbs stiff from the ritual beneath the roots, but their silence now bore a different weight. Not reverence, not even fear. It was the hush of people walking toward something they could not yet name, but knew would mark them. Ahead, the sky boiled in shades of orange and bruised gray. The wind had turned, dragging the scent of scorched wood and burned lard across them. More, somewhere within it, faint but unrelenting, came the sound of something dripping. It's not rain. Something slower, heavier. Final dot. They found the village near dusk. What remained of it, stone foundations still steamed. Thatched roofs were now blackened spines, collapsing inwards like dying animals. Cartwheels lay split in the mud, a churned mire of hoofprints, ash, and things best not named. A dog stood in the road, unmoving, blind in one eye, waiting for an order that would never come. No banners, no signs of siege, just fire, still smoldering, silence. It was the kind of destruction that was done quickly, but with knowledge. Someone had known exactly how to bring this place to its knees, what beams to burn, what wells to poison, what doors to bar before striking the match. Not the chaos of raiders. No, this was colder, sanctioned. The boy moved carefully, eyes darting across the remains. He saw a cradle upturned in the mud, its linen scorched at the edges. A bowl of lentils spilled beside it, still intact, untouched by flames. A bread oven cracked wide open, the last loaf burned to coal inside. Lives had ended. Mid-motion meals, uneaten, candles still lit, prayers half spoken, and then the bell dot. Not the warning bell from the woods. This was smaller, higher, a chapel bell. It swayed in the tower, half collapsed, ringing only when the wind pushed hard enough through the broken rafters. Each note trembled like a final breath. Beneath it, the chapel doors had melted inwards, their iron braces twisted like vines, but the stone frame still stood. The procession gathered outside its threshold, and then a voice spoke, not from within, but among them. We should not go in. It was the old woman with the milky eyes, the one who hadn't spoken since the famine took her sons. Her voice was low, like leaves scraping across stone. There were things ash cannot cover, but the elders stepped forward anyway. The inside of the chapel was darker than any forest hollow. The crucifix was gone, melted, maybe taken, but the altar remained, scorched and something lay upon it. A body, or what was left of one, not burned, preserved. A young monk. Barely more than a boy, mouth open in a scream that had frozen in his face. His skin was pale, bluish, waxen, untouched by flame. His hands were bound over his chest with red thread, not rope, thread, as if stitched into silence. Around him, the walls bore markings, not paint, not ash, not blood, symbols, again, circles, birds, eyes with no pupils. It was the same language carved beneath the roots. The boy stepped closer. His heart beat in his ears. He saw that the monk's eyes were sewn shut, tiny, meticulous stitches crossing each lid. Whoever had done this had not killed him in haste. They had taken their time. This was not cruelty for its own sake. Was offering a ritual behind them. The wind shifted. The dog barked once and ran. The smoke thickened, curling low through the village like a returning tide. And with it came something else, the faintest sound, metal dragging across stone. They were not alone. The elders turned to the door, but the old woman had already stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "This is the price," she said. He refused to see, refused to give. To give what? The boy whispered. She looked at him, then truly looked, and in that glance was everything. Grief, memory, knowing, his hunger. A creak split the air at the far end of the chapel, where the shadows clung deepest. A shape moved, not quickly, not violently, slow, as if waking from something long and cold. A man stepped forward, though calling him a man felt untrue. His robes were scorched black, his face half covered by a wooden mask shaped like a bird's beak, but where his hands emerged from the sleeves, they were coated in ash up to the elbow, and from them dangled the censer, rusted, still burning. He did not speak. He did not need to. The boy felt it, a weight behind his eyes, in his ribs. A memory not his own. The figure was not priest, nor judge. He was the keeper, the one sent when hunger became dangerous, when the rituals were broken, when people began to believe their pain meant something more than passage. The villagers had stopped giving, had tried to keep their grief private, hidden, and so, the keeper had come. The boy felt his limbs lock, his breath shorten, but the spoon, in his chest, still wrapped, still warm, pulsed once. He stepped between the elders and the figure, and without a word, he knelt. He removed the spoon, unwrapped it, and laid it on the scorched earth before the keeper, an offering, not of food, but of memory, of hunger that had been witnessed and named. The keeper stopped. The censer stilled, for a moment. Just one. The chapel became utterly quiet. The wind stopped. The bell held its breath. Then the keeper turned and walked back into the dark. The procession did not speak as they left the village. The boy walked first now, his feet black with soot, the linen still trailing from his hands. Behind them, the bell rang once more, but this time it sounded lighter, as if somewhere far beyond the smoke. Something had been released, something had forgiven, and ahead, at the edge of the horizon, they saw it. Not a town, not yet, but a shape, flickering in the wind. A banner, one they did not recognize, but one that would demand its own survival ritual, and a different kind of price. The wind had changed again. It no longer dragged ash behind it, nor the scent of scorched wood. Now, it carried something subtler, a copper timps, a metallic whisper, like iron struck on wet stone. The boy knew it before he saw it. Blood had been spilled. Recently, they crested the hill, and there it was, a pale valley split by a stream the color of old bone. On the far side, dug into the hillside like a wound refusing to close, was a trench, not for war, but for burial. Dozens of wooden stakes marked its edges, each one bearing cloths, scraps, tokens, ribbons. These were not graves. They were warnings, and beside them, nailed into a tree at the path's entrance, hung a tattered parchment. The ink had run from the rains, but one word was still clear, burned into the leather rather than written, untouched. The elders paused. Even the birds were quiet here. No flies, no carrion, as if the earth itself had closed its mouth and refused to speak. But the boy walked forward. His steps were steady now. The limp from frostbite had faded, or perhaps his body had simply stopped complaining. Cain had long since become background music. Hunger was no longer a beast, knowing. At his gut, it had grown quiet, patient, sharp, like a knife tucked into the folds of cloth. They crossed the valley slowly, their shadows stretching long behind them. The shrine had failed, the chapel had burned, the village had been marked, but still they walked, because there was no turning back anymore, only forward. At the trench's edge, the boy saw them. Not soldiers, not raiders, children buried up to the waist in mud and straw. Their torsos limp, heads lolled sideways, live, but barely. He knelt beside one, a girl no older than 6, her eyes flickering beneath bruised lids. Her lips moved without sound. The others joined him. They pulled the children free, one by one, washing their faces with cloth, wrapping them in cloaks too large to warm them. They had no food to give, no medicine, only hands, only breath, the fragile heat of the living. And then, beneath a cairn of stone, they found it, a diary, not bound. Just scraps of parchment, wrapped in twine, smeared with wax and blood. They read it aloud as the sun fell. It told of a village struck by fever, not plague, but something else, something slower. It began in dreams, then in voices. Hunger turned to obsession. Parents turned to ritual. Children were marked, bound, left, as offerings to an angel of deliverance. But no angel came. It's only silence and madness. The last page read, "We fed the river. It did not answer. Now we feed the earth." That night, they made fire. The first true fire since they fled the first frost. Not to warm themselves, but to signal. Flames climbed high into the dark, like a question hurled into the heavens. And then, from the ridge, another fire answered. A second flame, then a third, a tent, torches, figures moving through the trees. Not soldiers, not priests, survivors from other hamlets, other ruins, other forgotten ends of the world. They carried stretchers, bandages, baskets of dried root and smoked fat. One wore a red scarf, the mark of the Healers Guild from the southern hills, thought dissolved during the King's Famine 5 winters ago. Another had a blade with the seal of a knight's order, long presumed extinguished. They had survived in pockets, caves, in silence. Now, drawn by fire, they returned, not to rule, to rebuild. The boy watched as hands lifted the sick, as lips whispered names to children, too weak to remember their own. As bread was broken, real bread, not holy crust, and passed hand to hand, without blessing or barter. And there, for the first time in weeks, he wept, not from hunger, or fear, or pain, but from recognition. Someone had seen him, named him, fed him. He was not a ghost anymore. He was a witness, as dawn cracked open the sky like a shell, painting the frost gold. The boy walked alone to the river. He knelt, pulled a shard of charcoal from the fire, and wrote on the back of the final diary page, not a prayer, not a name, just a single line. We remembered what the earth forgot. Then he placed it beneath a stone, not for the dead, for the ones who would come after. The wind stirred the trees. The sun rose, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, there was warmth. this was how they would begin again. Not with kingdoms, not with crowns, but with memory, with fire, with the will to keep walking. And somewhere, deep in the earth, beneath the roots and bones and ash, the silence finally shifted, not broken, but listening. If this story moved you, if the cold haunted your skin, if the hunger ached in your chest, and if the fire warmed your heart, even for a moment, then don't let it vanish into silence. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. There are more forgotten stories waiting to be unearthed, and together, we will remember.